tonight.
Good evening, I'm Bo Gok-in. Tonight's top stories. South Korean President Yoon Suk-yeol impeached over his short-lived martial law declaration last week. He faces suspension of powers and duties and potentially removal from office. The government clarifies that plans are underway to phase out the masking of NRIC numbers, but it apologizes for making them publicly available on an online portal without sufficient public education first. Singapore's health ministry emphasizes the need for flexibility when fighting future disease threats. This approach has been important in dealing with the outbreaks of 2024. Also tonight, Singaporeans shopping more in Malaysia, with some malls reporting a 30% boost in business this month. On their lists, items for Christmas and Chinese New Year. South Korea's Yoon Suk-yeol has become the second president in the country to be impeached in 7 years, suspended of powers and duties halfway through his 5-year term. This comes after lawmakers decided to remove Mr. Yoon in a second vote over his short-lived martial law declaration last week.
부 85표, 기권 3표.
All 300 members of the National Assembly participated in the vote today. 204 in favor of impeaching the president versus 85 who were against. 3 people abstained and 8 votes were nullified. The Constitutional Court now has up to 180 days to determine whether to dismiss Mr. Yoon as president or restore his powers. In a televised address, Mr. Yoon has vowed to fight for his political future while urging support for the acting president.
저는 결코 포기하지 않겠습니다. 저를 향한 질책, 격려와 성원을 모두 마음에 품고 마지막 순간까지 국가를 위해 최선을 다하겠습니다.
Scores of protesters outside Parliament cheered in celebration of President Yoon's impeachment. Prime Minister Han Duck-soo is set to take over as acting president, while the main opposition Democratic Party declares the outcome a victory of the people. CNA's Lim Yan-suk has more from Seoul.
We did get a statement from the Constitutional Court saying that it has received the document showing that the National Assembly had impeached President Yoon Suk-yeol, and they will now start this process and start looking into this case. And it will start from Monday morning when they will be holding a meeting among the judges, and they'll be holding discussions, and will likely also start thinking about the schedule of this whole process, which could take months, but we will have to wait and see. And I spoke to some of the lawmakers who were coming out from the opposition camp. Most of them were smiling, and they said it was a relief that this was finally over. But it was interesting that one of them said that this was a tragic day for South Korea's history, because the fact that the lawmakers had to take this vote once again. They did it in 2016, 2017, when they had to impeach then President Park Geun-hye. But for them to go into the National Assembly and to have to vote against a president and to bring down a president, to impeach South Korean president, was a tragic day for South Korea. Now, the Prime Minister Han Duck-soo has taken over, and he is the acting president of South Korea. And just a while ago, he was heard saying that it was important to ensure there is no power vacuum. He's going to ensure that the security situation on the Korean Peninsula remains as it is. And he said that it was very important that the first thing he needs to do is try and overcome this crisis.
This vote to impeach the president does not necessarily mean it's the end of the road for Yoon Suk-yeol. Here's a look at what happens next. The impeachment case will now go to the Constitutional Court. By law, the court must make a final decision within 180 days after receiving the case, and at least 6 judges need to agree for there to be a verdict. There are currently 6 judges in the Constitutional Court, when there can be up to 9. The Speaker of Parliament has called on lawmakers to appoint another 3 to have a full bench. But as it stands, the vacancies mean that Mr. Yoon's removal from office would hinge on a unanimous decision from all 6 justices. Until the Constitutional Court reaches a verdict, Mr. Yoon would remain president, but would be suspended from exercising his powers. If the court upholds the impeachment case, the person is removed from office immediately. The Prime Minister then becomes the acting president. Elections have to be held in 60 days. Impeachment does not exempt the person from civil or criminal liability, meaning these cases can still go ahead. And this is not the first impeachment case in South Korea. The 16th president, Roh Moo-hyun, was impeached by the National Assembly in 2004. During his 2-month suspension, the Constitutional Court acquitted Mr. Roh, who was then restored to power. In December 2016, the 18th president, Park Geun-hye, was impeached after a political scandal involving interventions to the presidency from an aide. Unlike Mr. Roh, in Park's case, the Constitutional Court upheld the impeachment, with all 8 justices voting unanimously. Park would go on to be sentenced to 25 years in prison for abuse of power and coercion before being pardoned by President Moon Jae-in on compassionate grounds. In other news, U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken is in Jordan, meeting fellow diplomats to discuss the transition in Syria. Washington has been urging Arab countries and Turkey to put forward a united front in dealing with the new government in Damascus. In a meeting with the UN Special Envoy for Syria, Mr. Blinken pointed to the role the UN should play in providing aid after the fall of President Bashar al-Assad. Geir Peterson says the agency's efforts are now centered on ensuring that Syria does not collapse.
What is now critical in Syria is that we see a credible and inclusive political process that brings together all of Syria, all communities in Syria. And the second point is that we need to make sure that state institutions do not collapse and that we get in humanitarian assistance as quickly as possible. And if we can achieve that, perhaps there is a new opportunity for the Syrian people.
And still ahead on News Tonight, how the government has drawn wisdom on past outbreaks to prepare for future threats.
My Mitsubishi Electric StarMax aircon saves me energy and money. It's easy to clean and is so quiet.
At 55, I feel like
Singapore's health ministry says COVID-19 reinforced the critical need for flexibility in managing disease threats, especially in communication, healthcare coordination, and resource allocation. This approach has proven crucial in 2024, helping the response to outbreaks like tuberculosis and Mpox. Sabrina Ng explores how these lessons are shaping Singapore's strategy for future health crises.
Empty airports and quiet markets. It was as if life came to a standstill during the height of the COVID-19 outbreak in 2020. But today, the pandemic has seemingly faded into the background as crowds and gatherings return in full swing. Still, it's difficult to predict how future outbreaks will transmit and spread, and so staying ready is key.
If we look at, for example, our experience in COVID-19 and also our earlier experience in the original SARS coronavirus 1 in 2003, both of them are coronaviruses, but their spread, their presentation, and the response measures are vastly different. Therefore, it is important for us to have a preparedness response system that is flexible and nimble enough to deal with a future disease X. X referring to a future known or unknown disease that can present in whichever different way.
Prof. Lee says one key takeaway from COVID is the need to coordinate across different systems within the government and society at large. This came into play earlier in the year when a cluster of tuberculosis cases were uncovered at Jalan Bukit Merah. This open-air car park may be empty now, but this was a site where over 2,500 people were screened for tuberculosis. A temporary tent was set up here in January after 10 cases of TB was detected in the Jalan Bukit Merah area. And this effort to isolate and detect these infectious diseases quickly is a key part of Singapore's pandemic strategy. Authorities also use systems developed during COVID, such as registration platforms, to deliver test results and follow-up notices to residents. They also learned that consistent and swift communication was key to ease concerns in the event of a disease outbreak and to prevent misinformation from taking root.
To do this, we actually went on a door-to-door exercise, something we also did during COVID, to really communicate all about TB and what they need to do to every single resident. And we also work with the grassroots organizations to reach out to residents who, for example, were not at home and were not easy for us to reach out to.
The COVID-19 pandemic also showed the government the need to strengthen healthcare capacity. Mr. Lee adds that MOH is working to ensure that the healthcare system can meet demands during peacetime, but adapt to respond to pandemic outbreaks if needed. That includes keeping isolation and quarantine facilities warm and strengthening Singapore's supply chain resilience for critical goods like vaccines. Ensuring that healthcare workers are well prepared for the future is also crucial.
We need good systems to share frontline information when cases surge in an outbreak. We need resources to care for patients, testing, treating, admitting patients, making sure we get them home safely. And NCID is working to refresh these workflows in advance of the next outbreak.
So while memories of social distancing may be a thing of the past, lessons learned have burned themselves into the hearts and minds of Singaporeans. Authorities reassure that systems are in place so that when the next pandemic comes, Singapore will be able to adapt and save the lives and livelihoods of its people.
Singapore has retained features of several pandemic response measures since the outbreak of COVID-19. From border control to mask wearing, Sabrina Ng once more with some ways that Singapore is gearing up for the next outbreak.
On border control, all travellers coming into Singapore by land or sea must submit a health declaration through an online arrival card service. This is a step down from the height of COVID, when all travellers coming into Singapore had to show proof of a negative pre-departure COVID test. And while you don't have to mask up on the public transport or in indoor healthcare facilities since February last year, it's still a requirement for higher risk medical settings such as emergency departments. The Health Ministry says this is to improve general infection control practices and ensure that medically vulnerable persons and seniors are well protected. Singapore has continued to roll out updated COVID-19 vaccines even as it closes down joint testing and vaccination centres across the island. COVID-19 jabs remain free under the National Vaccination Programme and available at nearly 500 GPs and 10 polyclinics.
The government says plans are underway to stop masking National Registration Identity Card or NRIC numbers. However, when NRIC numbers were made publicly available on a new business registry portal, the government apologized for this mistake. They say there will be public education efforts on using NRIC details in the coming year. In a statement to the media, the Digital Development and Information Ministry says NRIC numbers are meant to identify individuals, so there should not be any sensitivity around making NRIC numbers public. While the practice of masking has been around for some time, public agencies are currently phasing this out. However, MDDI acknowledged there could have been better coordination, especially as netizens raised privacy concerns online. One analyst hopes that within those efforts, there will be clear guidelines and safeguards for all stakeholders.
Singaporeans have been socialized over the years, ever since the PDPA was enacted more than 10 years ago. We know that personal information, such as one's identity card number, is something that one should not freely share. And I think in this age where we are experiencing, more cases of identity theft and fraud, I think, that there is that public education effort that needs to be made.
The Accounting and Corporate Regulatory Authority, or ACRA, also stated that the new portal was in line with broader government efforts, but they recognized they moved ahead before the public was informed. The regulator says they will continue to review and update the portals. When CNA tested the feature earlier this morning, this message popped up at the top of the page. The day before, CNA could access NRIC numbers and full names of several prominent businessmen and cabinet ministers. The Personal Data Protection Commission website also shows guidelines on the collection, use, and sharing of NRIC are being updated.
It is important, that people feel comfortable and secure when it comes to sharing personal data, right? So here it's not a question of, the authorities saying it's all right, but I think there is also in an age where data is stolen, shared and all, and misused, that there must be the individual autonomy, there must be the individual comfort level.
Online site Transformative Justice Collective has been issued another correction direction under Singapore's anti-fake news law for social media posts about a prisoner scheduled for execution. This is the fifth such order issued to the site in 5 months. The Home Affairs Ministry said the posts contain a false statement that a death row prisoner was scheduled for execution before he had the chance to submit his clemency petition to the president. As such, the site is required to insert correction notices relating to the original posts with a link to the government's clarification. A correction direction has also been issued to TikTok, requiring it to notify all Singapore users who have accessed or will access the TJC posts. The ministry clarified that an execution will only be scheduled when a death row prisoner has exhausted all rights of appeal and a clemency process. MHA noted that when a prisoner's execution was scheduled and carried out, there were no pending legal matters that could have delayed the execution. His application to delay the execution was rejected by the Court of Appeal, which noted that he had ample time and legal advice to file a clemency petition, but chose not to. And coming up on News Tonight, Singaporeans undeterred by the stronger ringgit, heading over to Malaysia for the festive shopping.
Weather Report brought to you by Mitsubishi Electric.
Shops into Johor Bahru Mall say sales from Singaporeans shopping there have increased by up to 30% this month. Apart from looking for Christmas items, some are also already buying or inquiring about Chinese New Year goodies. Nadira Zaidi made the trip across the causeway to speak to shoppers and businesses.
The festive season is just around the corner and Singaporeans are back in Johor Bahru snapping up deals. And some are not just getting gifts for their family or friends.
Ada Singapore orang beli pun ada lah. Satu customer itu hari baru beli 25 biji satu orang. Dia untuk Christmas kasih dia punya staff. Dia cakap kita dia Singapore, dia ada compare harga sikit macam itulah.
This apparel store says, on average, Singaporeans spend around 300 to 500 ringgit at the shop.
Actually, in our Johor outlets, approximately 40% of our customers are from Singaporeans, while the remaining 60% are locals. For the past few months, our sales has been really slow. But for this month, December, our sales has gone up 20 to 30% as people already start shopping for Christmas gift and Chinese New Year is coming soon.
Another popular purchase, groceries. This supermarket says sales by Singaporeans are up by 10 to 20% for the month.
What they like to buy is actually the coffee, the confectionery, a lot of snacks. Okay, they love snack very much. That's why we focus more on snack. If let's say for our promotion itself, coffee, don't say that any brand, if they come, they grab.
The strengthening of the ringgit against the Sing dollar by about 6% since the start of the year hasn't deterred Singaporeans from shopping in JB.
At this supermarket, all of this would have cost me $30 at the start of the year when the exchange rate was at about 3.5. Now, all of this would cost me $32 at the exchange rate of about 3.2. To the Singaporeans that I spoke with, that $2 difference is still worth the trip.
Prices in Singapore are also increasing, so this 0.2 difference is not a big factor. People will still continue to come in.
I don't really spend on very big ticketed items when I come to JB, so it doesn't really make a difference for me.
While some are already planning ahead for Chinese New Year, at least one customer is looking much further ahead.
I'm buying for my festive seasons because Hari Raya is coming in March, and then we have wedding events as well, so might as well just get everything here in Malaysia. It's cheaper like 3 times, so yeah, that's why I come here to buy.
Singaporeans say shopping here can save them up to 50% compared to buying items back home.
The Association of Small and Medium Enterprises says more Singapore firms are inquiring about opportunities that may come from the upcoming Johor-Singapore Special Economic Zone. The initiative seeks to strengthen Singapore-Johor economic connectivity by improving the flow of goods, people, and the business environment in Johor. Retailers in Malaysia are expressing enthusiasm about upcoming opportunities, with suppliers initiating expansion talks. A Malaysian business association says the Johor state government has also ramped up vocational training efforts to address gaps in technical skills and workforce development.
Johor has never seen such exciting time before this. So this is the time. The time is now, in the sense that even the people from other states of Malaysia and even East Malaysia have come over to Johor because of work.
Durian sellers remain hopeful despite recent storms. Supplies of the tropical fruit were severely impacted by inclement weather in parts of Malaysia, which caused delays and a dip in earnings. Similarly, this meant that there's a shorter window for merchants and fans alike to enjoy the fruit during the year-end festive season. Stallholders say durians from Johor and Pahang are starting to come in, which will ease the supply in Singapore. They also say they are seeing prices starting to fall from the high that it is at now. Durian season is expected to last until the Chinese New Year.
For durians, they're tropical fruits, so there cannot be too much rain. If there's too much rain, the quality get affected by a lot, especially the Mao Shan Wang. Usually we open in November, but this year, because of the quality and the supplies, we had to push back the opening date to start of December. Yeah, and that affected, the revenue, the overall revenue, because of 1 month delay.
Singapore have picked up a second straight win in the ASEAN Mitsubishi Electric Cup, clinching a 3-0 win over Timor-Leste. For over an hour, the Lions struggled to breach Timor-Leste's defense, but they were awarded a penalty after striker Shawal Anwar was brought down in a box in the 73rd minute. Midfielder Kyoga Nakamura then converted the penalty for his first goal for Singapore. Shawal Anwar got a second goal for Singapore in his 82nd minute, tapping in a cross from captain Safwan Baharudin. He then sealed the win and all 3 points for the Lions with a third goal in the 89th minute. Singapore will next take on defending champions Thailand on Tuesday in Singapore. You can catch the ASEAN Cup live or on demand for free until 5th January on MeWatch. Visit mewatch.sg/ASEAN Cup for more details. And that's news tonight. Be good to yourself and each other. I'll see you around.
This program is available on